Okay, so as I say, I'm Lizzie. I am an expert nutritionist and wellness coach, and I specifically help women to eat and move in alignment with their female bodies so that they can achieve their goals without feeling hungry or exhausted. And today I'm going to be running you through some nutritional strategies to help you feel more energized and get rid of some of that cloud of mental fog that can creep in, especially when we're busy women and mamas and doing all of the things. So I'm gonna share my screen because I do have some slides. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Give me a yes. Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, now today we're going to be talking about some of the causes of low energy. So we're going to be talking about some of the surface level aspects of low energy levels from a nutritional standpoint. And then we're also going to dive into sort of the root cause of low energy. So sometimes it can be a matter of like making tweaks on the surface, but also there can be cases where low energy has a kind of deeper cause, and I'm going to go into that as well for you. And then we're going to talk about some steps that I recommend you do after this call so that you can really benefit from the information that I share. And then I'll open it up for Q&A, because as much as I like to talk about nutrition and wellness, I like to talk to you more. So I want to give you plenty of time to ask questions and for us to chat. Sound good? Cool. All right. Well, if you want, feel free to grab a pen and paper, turn off any weapons of mass distraction, i.e. phones, if you have notifications on, and let's dedicate this next 50 minutes, 45 minutes to you. All right, so whoop. I mentioned that there are several nutrients that are particularly important for ensuring that we have energy throughout our day and sustained energy. I think that's really the key, because I feel like our life is set up in a way that maybe we kind of have a little bit of energy in certain parts of our day. Maybe it's when we wake up, we feel energized, but then as we go through our day, maybe we have like a slump post lunch, or maybe we're waking up and we feel a little bit groggy and our energy builds throughout the day. And so it's really, the goal is to ensure that our energy is sustained for longer, right? And there are certain nutrients that we need to make sure that we're getting enough of in our diet to set the foundation for that sustained energy. Now, the first nutrient you have probably heard of is a mineral called iron. Iron is found in both plant-based foods as well as animal sources. So the iron that we find in animal based products is called heme iron, and the plant-based form of iron is called non-heme. Now, it's totally personal preference and up to you whether or not you follow a plant-based diet or you eat meat. That's, as I say, like that's a very personal decision, and I would never tell anybody to change one way or the other. However, from a biological and physiological standpoint, the iron that is from meat and animal-based sources is more easily absorbed by the body. So heme iron is just easier for our bodies to use as opposed to non-heme iron. So if you do eat meat and choose to have that, I would strongly encourage to make sure that you're including plenty of it throughout your week so that you're getting that heme iron. If you are plant-based, vegetarian, vegan, that's, again, a personal choice, and we can ensure that we help our bodies with the absorption of non-heme iron by pairing those specific foods with other foods, because other nutrients like vitamin C, for example, help increase the absorption of non-heme iron in the body. So non-heme iron sources include things like lentils and beans, and we can pair these sources with really good sources of vitamin C, like citrus, like green leafy veggies. They're another great source of non-heme iron themselves, to help our bodies increase iron absorption. So there are kind of ways to get around the fact that non-heme iron is harder for our bodies to absorb. So if you are plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, just make sure that you're including good sources of vitamin C in the same meal as your non-heme iron sources, just to kind of help support that absorption of iron. And iron is really important because essentially it is a component of our red blood cells, and our red blood cells carry oxygen throughout our body. That oxygen is important at keeping us energized and alert. Now, B vitamins are they are also important for energy, but they act in a different way to iron. So B vitamins are essentially catalysts for our metabolism. So they help our metabolism function optimally. And some B vitamins also have a really important role in our nervous system, and keeping our nervous system healthy, alert, and all of the good things. Particularly vitamin B12, which again, you know, if you are vegan, that's not a problem, but vegan diets tend to lack B12 because B12 only comes from animal sources. So if you are vegan, I strongly recommend you look into taking a B12 supplement, just to make sure that you're getting that really important vitamin for your nervous system and your energy levels and metabolism, because without it you can feel pretty gross. I personally went vegan for a while, and both my iron and B12 levels got super, super low because I wasn't a nutritionist at that point. I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt just, if cover little ears if they're in the room, but I felt crap. The reason is because, you know, those two nutrients are very important in our diet. So make sure that you're getting both iron and especially like B12, but all the B vitamins. And as I mentioned, B12 you can get from a range of animal sources, so meat, fish, eggs, dairy, those are the key ones. And then you can get all of the other B vitamins from things like whole grains, fruit and vegetables, all of those kind of like good stuff. And if you're interested, I can provide you, just drop me an email afterwards. I'll put my email in the chat, and I can provide you with a list of foods that are good sources of each B vitamin, because there are about 10 different B vitamins, and we want to make sure that we're having plenty of those in our diet. Okay, any questions so far? Awesome. I'll always check in with you and make sure that I'm not like going too slow or going too fast. So we've covered the kind of essential, I think the most essential mineral and the most essential vitamin for energy. Now we want to look at our macronutrients, and carbs tend to get a really, really bad rep, but they are our body's preferred source of energy in terms of nutrition. So if we're not eating enough carbohydrates, then we tend to feel pretty gross. And if we're having sort of the quick release, fast acting carbohydrates, for example, from processed foods, that can also cause our blood sugar to go on a bit of a roller coaster, and for us to lack in energy. So what I mean by sort of like simple processed carbohydrates are things like those found in chips, cakes, cookies, sweets, and you know, white bread, white pasta, that type of stuff. And that's not to say that these things can't be part of your diet. They're absolutely, I think, an essential part of a healthy, balanced diet. But we also want to make sure that we're choosing, where possible, the more slow release and complex carbohydrates. So by this, I mean things like, oh, this is Tux. This is my fur baby. Hi, Tux. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we're including things like whole grain bread, pasta, fruits and veggies, oats, quinoa. Those are all great sources of complex carbohydrates. And I would always advise you to have some form of carbohydrate with each meal, in addition to a good source of protein and a good source of fat. And that's going to help sustain your energy throughout the day. And without that, as I say, what can happen is that your blood sugar can kind of go on a little bit of the roller coaster. And so your body is working really, really hard to release like stored carbohydrates from its cells. But over time, like this can cause a lot of fatigue on the body, and you just to kind of like feel drained and unable to focus. Then, of course, we also want to talk about like your total calorie intake, because it goes without saying, if we're not actually putting in enough calories, which is essentially energy, it's a measure of the amount of energy that a food contains, then we're also going to be lacking in energy, right? So if we're not putting in energy, we can't expect to actually feel energized. So if, for example, you're not eating enough throughout the day, or maybe you're eating, but you're also working out a lot, you're very busy running around, this can cause your like total energy balance to go into a deficit, and you can kind of be lacking in that energy as well. And this is very, very common, especially for women who, say, for example, have weight loss as a goal. We've been told and sold this idea that we need to eat less and move more in order to get the body that we want, and that is incorrect. Oftentimes with that strategy, what can actually happen, at least in the long term, is that our metabolism kind of shuts down, and that can cause us to hold on to any weight that we have, and that can kind of like cause a lot of imbalances and chronic issues with our hormones, and that in itself can also cause low energy levels. And then on the same kind of side of the coin, we have something that's very popular at the moment, which is intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is essentially, there are different ways that you can intermittent fast. The most popular, and you've probably heard of it, is the 16-8 diet, where you fast the 16 hours of your day and then eat within an 8-hour time window. Now, it's been researched a lot in men, and it's been shown to help with the management of diabetes, weight loss, and it can actually, in some extreme cases of fasting, it can also help prevent aging. And as a result, intermittent fasting has become very, very popular for people who want to, as I say, lose weight, manage diabetes, and ward off aging. However, as I mentioned, all of this research is in men. And the reason why this is because from a scientific perspective, women are harder to measure in a controlled setting. We are cyclic, we are not linear like men. Our hormones ebb and flow throughout the month. We also have the possibility that we could become pregnant during a study, and there are a lot of other factors that science finds it harder to control for in an experimental setting. So the research on intermittent fasting in women is very, very scarce. And in fact, intermittent fasting isn't great for women in our reproductive years, because it is actually a form of stress on the body. And that stress is not eating for long periods of time, and that can cause a lot of disruption in our hormones. That is maybe a different case for postmenopausal women, and I have had clients who have seen a lot of success with intermittent fasting, kind of post-menopause. But if you are in a reproductive age, I highly, highly, highly discourage you to do intermittent fasting because of that stress on your body and your hormones. And that can, again, have a negative impact on your energy levels. So again, checking in, everyone's good. Any questions? Feel free to type anything in the chat. All right. So that's kind of the surface level, right? We want to make sure that we're getting the nutrients and the total amount of energy in our diet, right? And sometimes, a lot of times, when I see clients, women are eating healthily, they're getting a balance of nutrients in their diet. They, okay, maybe from a calorie-wise perspective, some women might be restricting too much, but a lot of the times, generally, women are eating well, exercising like fairly regularly, maybe not like every day, but they're doing it kind of, 3 to 4 times a week, perhaps. And they're, doing all of the basic things, but they still feel awful. And that's when we want to look more at sort of root cause of why you are lacking in energy. So one of those things could be that you're actually not absorbing the nutrients that you're putting into your body. Right? So, okay, yeah, you're taking in all of these nutrients from all of these different foods, but maybe somewhere in your digestion, something is out of balance, which is meaning that you're not actually able to absorb the nutrients from your food. So that can be a potential cause of your low energy levels, is that you're not actually like able to absorb those nutrients. Another thing that I see a lot, and I'm seeing more and more, is that it's not actually to do with nutrients at all. It's actually because you're having issues with your sleep. Either you're not sleeping enough, and you're really struggling to get to sleep at night, or you're waking up in the morning early and struggling to get back to sleep, or you're getting your hours in, but you're waking up in the morning and you don't feel rested at all. And again, that can be caused by imbalances in the body related to your melatonin levels and your cortisol levels. And that is something that we need to address in order for you to feel better. So I'm sure you know, cortisol is kind of like our stress hormone. It's also our awake alert hormone. So in the morning, we have higher cortisol, and throughout the day, it drops off to enable us to sleep. But sometimes that can get out of balance. And then we also have melatonin, which is our kind of rest sleep hormone, which is kind of the opposite of cortisol. And it sort of is lowest when we wake up, and then it sort of gradually rises in the evening to help us drift off at night. And some women, this hormone balance can kind of like get out of whack. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that through different nutrition and lifestyle measures that maybe aren't as obvious as just eat better and move, regularly. We also have something that I did a reel on earlier in the week, and that is perimenopause. And perimenopause does not get the airtime it deserves, despite us all going through it. It can happen anytime between the ages of like 37, 38, all the way up to menopause, which can be in our late sort of mid to late 40s, early 50s. So it can last for a period of 10 years. And essentially during perimenopause, our reproductive hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, are changing a lot. And these changes in our reproductive hormones can kind of have a knock-on impact in our energy levels and how we're feeling in our bodies, both physically and also emotionally, because our bodies are changing, and that can be very scary and overwhelming for a lot of women, especially because perimenopause isn't talked about enough, and we don't really know what to expect. So that could be a potential reason for having low energy, despite, again, having kind of like a good foundation with your diet. And then we also have stress. Now, stress is something, again, that I think gets brushed under the rug, but stress can come in very many different forms. Physical stress, like I talked about with the intermittent fasting, if that's a physical stressor on the body. Working out too much is also another big physical stressor. Chronic dieting, all of those types of things. And then mental and emotional stress, like looking after young children, looking after elderly parents, having a busy schedule at work. All of that type of thing can be stressful. And again, our bodies need to use energy to deal with this stress. When we're in a stressful situation, we go into our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response, and that kind of sort of gears everything up to kind of allow us to deal with the stress, and that uses energy. But unfortunately, with our very busy world, this kind of like stress can kind of compound. And yes, okay, we're in this sort of fight or flight response to deal with a stressor, but what's supposed to happen is that we're supposed to then go back into our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest phase, after that stressful event. But what tends to happen nowadays is that we're kind of like chronically being activated in this sort of sympathetic state, and we're kind of like getting all these stresses build up. So think of it like a cup. You sort of like have one stressor come in, and then maybe another stressor, and then another stressor, and then it sort of overflows and gets to a point where our bodies are chronically fatigued, and the word or the term adrenal fatigue is used a lot. That's not actually, it's not a thing. It's not a diagnosable condition, but it's essentially, when people are talking about that, people are talking about having chronic levels of cortisol being released into the body as a result of multiple stressful events or a prolonged stress. And this is taxing our adrenal glands and causing us to feel fatigued. So that can also be at play. And essentially, all of these things that I just mentioned are a result of some sort of hormonal imbalance. So I mentioned cortisol, I mentioned melatonin, I mentioned estrogen, progesterone. And that's why I work with women a lot on sort of their hormone health and correcting any hormonal imbalances, is because once we get to the root cause and know which hormones or hormone is out of balance, we can then quickly identify, oh, okay, cool. That means that we need to make this tweak in our nutrition or lifestyle or workouts, or whatever it is, so that we can feel better quickly without having to take medications or without having to rely on caffeine. So if you do think that there may be kind of any of these things going on, then I would strongly consider looking into whether or not there is a hormonal imbalance in your body, and how we can kind of like reverse that in a safe and sustainable way. Yes, Kate, hello. Do you have a question? Feel free to.
I do have a question. Can you hear me okay? I'm in the car now.
Yes.
Okay. So I was wondering, how often do you recommend getting like your iron or other hormones like tested to check their levels? Like over the years, I have had iron tests and had my thyroid tested, and I don't know like how much it changes over time if it was in a normal range at that time, but then like with having children or other life stages as a female, like how much change can happen, and just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I love that. So thank you for asking. And I would say there's no kind of real rule of thumb. It's really a matter of you kind of tuning into your body and listening to what it's asking for. So if something does feel off, or you feel like it's changed, or maybe you've entered a different season of your life, I would recommend getting things tested again. And I also wanted to kind of like just caution as well with regard to testing too often, and also going into your doctor and asking for a test, because yes, your doctor can kind of run some basic tests, but they don't necessarily always test for things on a deeper level. So yes, they can test to see your iron levels, and yes, they can test to see like B12, for example, and some of the thyroid hormones, but they don't necessarily test active thyroid hormone, which is kind of the one that we want to actually investigate. And they won't test for things like cortisol or melatonin or any of the reproductive hormones. So I would just say maybe consider where maybe the things that I kind of like listed today, where maybe you're having kind of, you're identifying, oh, that kind of sounds like me. And then again, as I say, I'll put my details in the chat, and you can book a call with me as well, so that we can talk about specifically what would be a good test to run for you. Does that make sense? Because I don't want you to kind of like have to go do unnecessary testing if it's not going to be helpful. So I want to make sure that like you're equipped with the knowledge, but also the right tools, so that you can identify like where maybe this low energy is coming from. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. So just being strategic and
Absolutely.
selecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, I saw Desiree, you had your hand raised as well.
That just kind of answered mine. I have asked my doctors, like, I don't necessarily think anything's wrong, but I just, for some peace of mind, since having my daughter, I've asked my doctors the last couple of years if they could just do some more blood tests besides just the basic glucose and cholesterol. And they just all look at me like I'm crazy and I can't get in. I'm like, I will pay. I realize it's not covered. And they just look at me like I'm crazy and like, we don't do that. And I'm like, well, when I was pregnant, you ran, like, I just want to know, like, is anything low? But so that kind of answered it. Like, I think I don't know. I'm still kind of looking into it, but it's, I don't know, off topic. Sorry, just very irritating. So I'm like, I will, like, I just run a little bit extra blood test for me and like give me a little peace of mind. But yeah, you would think they would, but yeah, it's like, no, we don't really do that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not off topic whatsoever. I'm glad that you mentioned this, because it is such a frustration for a lot of women, when you go to your doctor and they look at you like you're crazy. They're like, well, we ran this test, you're fine, but that you're not feeling great and there might be something. And I think the problem is that when you go to your GP, they're great, they have so much training, they have a lot of tools at their disposal, but they don't necessarily have the time, which is I think a major disservice to them and also you, because what they're unable to do is they're unable to kind of really go into the root cause stuff and really investigate deeper what's going on. And so taking kind of like a more functional medicine approach, I found over the last 5 years is it's kind of a complement to Western medicine. It's not a replacement, and it should never be one. But I think it's really important that, again, we listen to our bodies and we're able to kind of like have the tools and the resources available to us so that we can identify, you know, where exactly we're feeling a little bit off, and that we don't, and that we know that it's not all in our heads, right? And I think that's, you know, that's really, really important to just kind of like be aware of. So thank you for just bringing it up, and mentioning it, because you're definitely not alone. And I see this a lot as well with, you know, type in the chat if this happened to you. It definitely happened to me, when I decided that, you know, I was having issues with my period, and I went to my doctor and I said, okay, you know, what can I do to kind of, I had irregular cycles, and the answer was just, you go on the pill, right? And so I accepted it. I was 19 probably at the time, and so I was like, okay, well, if it's going to fix it, and just took the pill for best part of 10 years, and it wasn't actually getting to the root cause of why my cycles were irregular. So when I decided to come off the pill, and kind of like, you know, have a non-hormonal method of birth control, my body had 10 years of not actually really learning how to have a regular cycle. So I had to do a lot of work on making sure that those imbalances were corrected, because the pill doesn't cure it. And I think, you know, that's a very common occurrence as well, with the medical system, is you go to the doctor, okay, here's a pill. And again, that's not necessarily going to be helpful to your body in the long term, especially if we're talking about, you know, anything to do with hormones and energy levels, especially when we are transitioning between different phases of our life, right? So, you know, pregnancy, that can cause big hormonal shifts. And if our bodies are already a little bit out of balance, that can kind of swing things even further. Again, perimenopause and menopause, where women are, maybe they've been on birth control for a very, very long time, because their doctors told them to be on birth control, and you know, they come off, and all of a sudden you haven't got those hormones, those artificial hormones, and your hormones are changing. So that can cause a lot of discomfort and issues too. So you know, I'm not knocking the medical approach, but there is something to be said about you know, having those issues. Yeah, oh my gosh, I just saw the chat, Cassidy. Yeah, literally just happened even after I told them. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry that that's happened. And as I say, you know, just know that you're not alone there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so yes.
oh, I was gonna say, just the frustration of like it just being a band-aid of just get on the pill, rather than like any effort, like you said, of trying to find the root cause. That was just frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, the pill for sure has been useful for a lot of women, and in terms of, you know, female you know, freedom to, you know, choose their careers, whatever. But there is also this hidden component that again doesn't really get talked about, that causes a lot of frustration and not feeling seen in the medical system. So yeah, totally understand what you're going through. So as I mentioned, if you do want to talk about this from a personal perspective, obviously I love doing you know, group coaching and webinars and seeing you all, but you know, you all have very specific body, like everybody is literally different. You have very different lifestyles, different needs. So if you do want to chat about kind of like your specific situation and just kind of like get some free impartial advice, like please feel free to reach out to me. Oh, sorry. I am not a technology person. I'm a nutritionist. As I promised, I would put that link in the chat, and then my email is lizzy@nutritionbylizzy.com. So feel free to reach out either on those channels. As I say, you know, that's not I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I just want to ensure that you're getting the tools that are going to help you the most, because as I say, I've been through situations where I felt very frustrated and just wanted somebody to kind of help. So if you feel like you want to do that, I would love to chat. In the meantime, again, I would say just consider your diet. Are you missing any key nutrients, that iron, B vitamins, the complex carbohydrates and total energy, and also maybe think about where else in your life could there be a potential root cause. So for example, stress levels, are you having sleep issues, maybe digestive difficulties, and just maybe you're in a different season of life. And as you know, we were talking about a little bit earlier, our needs will change. And so knowing where you're at with regards to your nutrient levels, your hormones, that can be really, really powerful. And I think what, if anything, I hope that you take away from this call is that it's all about finding something that works for you and you knowing your body, and not necessarily having to rely on external sources to tell you what you need to be doing. I think it's a really powerful thing when we can tap into and listen to our body and like look for the subtle signals that they're giving us. Like, for example, if you're having issues with your digestion and bloating, that's kind of your body subtly telling you there's something is out of balance. Maybe you are, I don't know, feeling a little bit more snappy towards your spouse and your partner. That's kind of like an indication that maybe something is off. So just kind of like knowing yourself and knowing your body really is the most powerful tool that you can have with regards to addressing anything. Yes, energy levels and feeling like you, but so many different things. So I just want you to know that. And so if you have any questions, just let me know. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can see you all. Okay. All right. Anybody has any questions, feel free to open up. We've got a nice small group, so yes, Cassidy.
So my question is around the stress portion of it, especially being a stay-at-home mom. Like, do you have any tangible things that I could do, like physically, when there's things that are out of my control, like the whining or the behavioral outbursts, or things like that cause a physical stress reaction that's not in my control in the moment? Like, what could I do to respond to that would help me bring those levels down?
Yeah, great question. So I really, really love breath work. So there are different types of breathing techniques out there, but the one that I specifically use and I find really, really helpful is called box breathing. So box breathing essentially involves you inhaling for the count of 4, holding for the count of 4, and then exhaling for the count of 4, pausing for the count of 4, and then repeating. And this technique is really going to help you go from that sympathetic state of that fight or flight, right? Because our heart rate increases, our breathing increases. And by directly targeting our breath, by slowing it down, that can cause all of the other systems in our body to kind of relax. So it's it sounds super easy, but it's super, super powerful. I like to use it as well before I go to sleep at night. If my mind's kind of racing and I'm thinking about all the things that happened during my day or everything that's got to happen the next day, then I use box breathing to kind of help my body relax and to drift off. And that's probably the most simple and powerful technique I've encountered, that you can kind of take with you wherever you go.
Perfect.
Yeah. So let me know if you try it out. I'd be interested to hear how that goes.
Will do. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else?
I have a question. I know right off the bat that sleep deprivation is one of my biggest hurdles with energy levels. My beautiful children just don't let me sleep. And I know, like, pre-children, like, I was an 8 to 9 hour, like, needed that to feel human during the day. And so do you have recommendations on, like, right now it's just a struggle in the mornings, like getting out the door, even getting out of bed, like
Right. Yeah.
as soon as the alarm goes off, and just functioning. And yeah, getting just my mind cleared and ready for the day, whether that's through food or like other routine. I have been trying to do like overnight oatmeal in the crock pot for breakfasts, or we have been trying to do more eggs so that we have some more like sustained foods that are releasing energy slowly. But yeah, curious to hear if you have suggestions when sleep is hard.
Yeah. And I'm like you. I am definitely like an 8-hour plus sleeper. I always am very jealous of my husband because he needs like 5 to 6 hours and he's fine. So that's very, very frustrating. And I know what it's like to not get that and how it can feel very difficult to get going in the morning. So what you're doing with the overnight oats, that's great. I would say maybe consider, if you can, what can be really, really helpful at just helping our bodies kind of like feel more alert in the morning is exposure to natural sunlight in the morning, because that's going to regulate your circadian rhythm. So I would say if you can, like, get some natural light exposure. If you can't, I know it's sometimes difficult, especially in the winter, like turning on all of the lights in your house and just kind of like getting some form of exposure to light can be really, really helpful. You don't necessarily have to get one of those light boxes. I know some people do have them, but that can be really, really helpful at just helping your body just kind of like rev up through the day without the caffeine and stimulants. And then I would also think about what your routine's like in the evening to try and help you support a better quality sleep. So even though you're not getting the same number of hours, it's also about quality. So considering maybe what I like to do I've got an iPhone, and I switched the settings to a blue light filter in the evening. So if you go into settings on your phone, you can actually automatically change your settings so that your phone stops emitting blue light from a certain period of time. So I do that because I know myself, and I know that I'm going to be on my electronic device in the evening. But I don't want that blue light that's gonna reduce my melatonin levels. So I switch on my blue light like filter on my phone just to help my body have a better chance of producing melatonin and getting a better quality sleep. And again, box breathing can be a really great way of helping you drift off as well, if that's something that's challenging. If you're getting up in the night and then you're sort of like feeling like you can't get back to sleep, that can be a really great technique too. So yeah, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, you're so welcome. Any other questions? These are great. All right. Well, I know if you're anything like me, and I leave a webinar like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I have a question. So as I say, feel free to reach out. I also have Instagram, so my handle is @Nutrition by Lizzy. So you can always DM me there as well. And of course, you can also message me on the Very Good Mothers website. Emily, hello.
Hi, sorry, I'll start my video.
Oh, you're good.
I have my little one in the back. I have an issue where whenever I get like the mom overwhelm or like the mom stress, and it kind of like comes to like a point, like I always can, like my stomach is very sensitive. So basically what happens is if it's like a real dramatic event, like I'll get a stomach ulcer, which will then make me have nausea and stuff, which kind of like puts me on a bad eating path, you know, because like my stomach's so like sensitive and raw that like it's like I have to just, I don't want to eat. I don't want to cook or I don't want to look at food.
Yeah.
But once again, then I have to take an antacid because that's the only, I've tried the apple cider vinegar and more natural things, but like an antacid, that's what my doctor has given me to like kind of cure the ulcer. So then I'll stop taking that, stress will come back. It's a cycle. I've noticed it's a cycle by now. So is there anything that I can, outside of, yeah, of course, working with a counselor and managing my stress, is there any like protective things or whenever those times are coming, any good things to go to for like dense nutrition to get me through those times?
Yeah, that's great awareness of the cycles, first of all. That's kind of like the first step, right, is actually identifying what's going on. I also experienced a little bit of that during a stressful period in my life, and it's very uncomfortable having that kind of like that acid in your throat. And so like totally understand wanting to use the antacids. What I would say is, again, during that time, breathing techniques can be helpful at just settling your stomach. Another thing that can also be helpful both during those kind of flare-ups and kind of when you're in remission is taking aloe vera juice. That's going to really help kind of provide some lubrication in your digestive tract and just kind of help soothe. So the brand I recommend is called Lily of the Desert. They do a really good quality product and it's not too expensive. You can get it on Amazon and another website. So I would say try that. That's very healing. And then to answer your question in terms of nutrient dense foods and making sure that you're kind of like getting everything in during those times, I like to use smoothies when food isn't appealing to somebody. So generally, you know, meal replacement shakes and smoothies and all of that kind of stuff, I feel is an addition. It's not a replacement to meals. But in certain times, like your example, things like smoothies can be very helpful at packing things in. So, you know, including.
Yeah, because basically what it leads to is exhaustion.
Right.
Like I get like super fatigued.
Right. Yeah. So making sure that you're kind of like including plenty of different things in there, like, you know, fruits, veggies, maybe some yogurt, some avocado. That's nice and nutrient dense. It's going to have plenty of healthy fats. Again, it's going to help not only with energy levels, but also it's going to help protect your stomach from any kind of like the kind of discomfort that's going on. So,
yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Desiree, I noticed you got your hand raised as well.
Sorry, mine's not really a question, but I just wanted to say that I did a call with Lizzy a couple of years ago, and I highly suggest reaching out to her if you're interested, because I just love her, and she was very helpful to me. So, and my daughter said hi, Lizzy, by the way. So.
Hi, Desiree. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it, and it really does mean a lot to be able to help. So. Again, thank you so much to everyone for being here. I really appreciate you, and I hope this has been helpful. And yeah, reach out if you have questions and any updates from me if you use any of the tools that I shared.
Thanks, Lizzy.
You're so welcome. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all in the group.
Bye.
Bye.